Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very happy to join this conference organized by Chair Anthropolis and participate to this roundtable. My talk will be on hydrogen mobility. The main point will be to emphasize the need for coordination between local and global cooperation. Hydrogen is now very fashionable. There has been many hydrogen plants all across Europe. Just to mention the French hydrogen plan, it plans to spend 7 billion euro over the next 10 years, about half of it in the next 3 years. The mobility is one of the target for this plan. The mobility has been declined into support for deployment in cluster. I will describe that later. There are new usage to be looked at in terms of R&D at this point for boats and planes. And one issue which is emphasized in the plan is the coordination with other European plans. You know, I know Germany is spending about 7 billion as well. There is Spain spending almost 9 billion, Portugal, Italy, etc. The main point I would like to discuss is, as I mentioned, is the need for coordination between local and global issues. Start with the local issue. The point I will make concerns the so-called chicken and egg issue. If that is the fact that hydrogen cars and hydrogen refueling stations are complementary goods that need to be deployed together. And these belongs to completely different type of players. So the coordination is not that spontaneous. We'll discuss how this can be done at the local level. The global challenge comes from the fact that hydrogen remains a rather new technology for mobility. This means that hydrogen vehicles are quite expensive. Now, we know that for new technology, new green technology, at the early stages, costs and prices are high, and they decline through volumes, through accumulated production. And this decline can only be achieved through a global view, that is a global coordination of usage in the different clusters. So that's, I will try to discuss this as well. So we want to have a coordination at the local challenge at the local level to cope with the chicken and egg, and at the global for accumulation, high volume of production. But before we go there, I think it's important when we talk about the role of hydrogen in mobility that we recognize that the market will be segmented between battery and fossil fuel. Here is one way of seeing that. This pictures comes from the Hydrogen Council. It was published, it appeared in 2017. And in this picture, you have, for example, small cars. This is a segmentation, small car, medium size, large car, heavy duty truck, medium and heavy duty truck, etc. And this represents segments. And what's important here is how dark is blue. If we have light blue, it means this suggests that the share of hydrogen will be extremely low. If the blue is dark, is very dark, it means that in this projection, the hydrogen market share will be high. It will be medium for medium-sized car, a little larger for large car, larger again for trucks. This segmentation is also done in terms of range and in terms of weight. And behind that, the argument is that hydrogen provide more autonomy than battery, because the density of energy in terms of weight is lower, so you can drive longer journey with hydrogen. You could drive long journey with battery, but the battery would be very hard, very heavy. So if it's very heavy, and if you have a small car, it means you could not have long journey with a large battery, because it would be too heavy. So that's explained that. The other argument is the time for refilling. For refilling a hydrogen tank, the idea is that it is not so much different than refilling with gasoline. It takes a few minutes. Rather, with battery, it may take hours. Now, this segmentation is changing over time and has to be revisited because there's changes to advantage because the technology is moving at pretty fast pace. Another segmentation is, this is coming from Toyota. Toyota is a motor constructor, which is on top in terms of hydrogen. And when they communicate, that's the kind of graph that they show. Here they plan, to have mostly a fuel cell. Here they plan to have mostly battery. And again, you have the size, which is somewhat related to the weight. And here you have distance travel, which is the range. Toyota is pretty good in terms of hybrid. That's probably explained the large share that they give to hybrid here. But that's maybe just a transition in terms of technology, and possibly hybrid may not remain in the next, let's say, 10, 20 years. Okay, now we know that when we talked about deployment of hydrogen for mobility, we have to specify what kind of segment we're talking about. But the deployment of hydrogen didn't start with the hydrogen plans of last year. It started much earlier, and my analysis comes from discussion and cost-benefit analysis, which I carried over with students and colleagues on past deployment. Some of them have been studied deeply, some more just from the gray literature. I want to discuss first, this question of the chicken and egg issue, and use two examples. These are two early deployments that took place in 2015. H2 mobility in Germany. H2 mobility in Germany, when it was deployed, the goal was to get as 400 hydrogen refilling stations by 2023. Behind this project, there was a government subsidy, government support, and the support also was coming from Air Liquide, Linde, which are energy supplier, Daimler, which is a car, automobile, which I'll come back later, and these are the fossil fuel, traditional Shell, Total. These partners did not have the same kind of stake in this project. Air Liquide and Linde had clear stake for providing energy. Daimler was not so much committed, at the time. It was thinking of getting into the business of producing a fuel cell car, but it didn't committed much money on that project. And these traditional energy suppliers were just here to see what's going to happen. They were not very active players. So altogether, we can see there were only energy providers on this plan. Now, when we look at what happened, from my information, I think that at present we have 75 hydrogen refilling stations that are in place in Germany. A number of them are not profitable. This is because there are not enough cars. To give you an idea, in 2020, there were roughly 300 new fuel cell cars in Germany that were sold. Now, an efficient refilling station is like a 400 kilogram per day. So you would need like let's say 350 cars to operate that efficiently. Well, you see that there is no comparison, no adequacy between the number of hydrogen refilling stations and the park of vehicles. So that's probably it's not operating. Another experiment is in France. It's called EasyMob in Normandy. That's a project which is typical of some projects that occurred in France. There is very strong support from the political community, local committees, the local politicians. In this area, the idea was that they would have a lot of free energy because it's very windy. They would have plans for windmills. They would also. This is an area where we also have the new nuclear plant, which is eventually will be operational. So they had a wonderful plan of using this energy to produce hydrogen. And then they had plans for hydrogen with boat. They were always in the plan. They thought they would export hydrogen to Japan. They would have all kinds of mobility here. The plan was to have 15 hydrogen refilling station here, 250 cars, and in 2 years' time. The partners were the community here. Symbio was a new startup that would provide fuel cell, and this is surfing is an operator for construction. Well, if you look at now, there are only eight refilling stations that have been deployed. The capacity of the refilling station is 20 kilograms per day. Extremely small stations, a very unprofitable station, because there are only, if I can get the right data, there are only like 50 vehicles operating in this area, 50 kilometers, 50 vehicles. This is very, so again, you see an inadequacy between the project for deployment, infrastructure, and the level of the park. So that's an important issue, and we will see that this can be mitigated if you think of building simultaneously the infrastructure and the vehicle park. And these two examples of that is the HYPE taxi fleet project in Paris and the H2 truck fleet project in Switzerland. This started also in 2015, but I come back to that later. You see, the institutional arrangement is there is an energy provider, Air Liquide in particular. Toyota is involved in that, and the city of Paris is taking part of it, and also the taxi operator is part of the institutional arrangement, and because all these parties have somehow interest in coordinating their effort, it is much easier to balance the deployment of infrastructure and the predictable demand for hydrogen. Still, this plan is going more slowly than it was expected at the beginning. They were expecting 600 cabs in Paris in 2020. I think there are more like less than 100. But the CEO of Hype is a very entrepreneurial type, and he just recently acquired another cab operator operating on diesel with 600 diesel cabs, and he wants to transfer these to make these diesel cabs going to hydrogen. Is also planning to have more hydrogen refilling stations around Paris. Currently, there are 3 of them operating. In fact, he's also planning to have the same kind of deployment in London and in Brussels. Well, it's going also more slowly. Another example is in Switzerland. In Switzerland, again, I will go through much in details. Again, we have the institutional arrangement between energy provider, a constructor, which is here Hyundai, which provide the trucks, and the operator, which is the way the transport companies that will use the trucks. Something which is favorable to the development of that in Switzerland is that in Switzerland you have to pay an extensive toll if you're operating a diesel truck in motorways. There was an idea to do that in France, for example, but it did not survive political pressure. I think it is also operating in Germany. This is important, and I will show that later why it is important. Now. We've seen how you can possibly, mitigate the chicken and egg issue by arranging, making institutional arrangement at the local level. Let's look now at the global challenge of reducing the price or the cost of vehicles. I will use for that the example of fuel cell electric bus and the European project Jive, given that there are other projects which I will not discuss, which are somewhat similar to the Jive project. Now, the bus, the bus, urban bus, there are about 100,000 park bus. I mean, the bus park in Europe, scattered among 75 cities. So major cities in large cities in Europe operate a large fleet of bus, the cities, as was mentioned by Milena, cities have extremely strong pressure to go to make an energy transition in their transportation because of climate changes, but also because of air pollution, which is a it's a major issue for reducing the level of diesel in public transportation. There has been studies that show, that possibly the market share of fuel cell would be roughly 10% of this fleet. So if we have in mind, that there are some advantages which are traditional, the fast refueling, the autonomy, but also something which may be important for buses is that they have to fuel cell operate better in extreme weather conditions, and also if the journey they make have a lot of up and downs, because in these conditions they are more efficient. In a way, they are better than battery. You see, in particular, if you have an electric car, you recognize that if you if you put the climatization on, or if you put the heater on, and if you listen to the radio at full loud, that reduces considerably, the level of autonomy. This is not the case with the fuel cell. But the problem is that fuel cells are much more expensive than battery. Here I have an order of magnitude, 650,000 euro for a fuel cell bus, relative to 450 approximately for an electric bus. If we put that into a table to get the total cost of ownership, then the purchase price can be translated in euro per kilometer, given a kilometer per year and life duration. Then you add maintenance, personal cost, fuel cost. The fuel cost depends on the unit price you take and the consumption, and altogether you have the total cost of ownership. You see the total cost of ownership in 2020 for a fuel cell is much higher than diesel, and is also higher than the battery electric bus. If you take into consideration the CO2 emission and you compute the abatement cost, it takes you how much you have to pay to reduce the emissions of 1 ton. So you divide the difference by the emission, and you get something which is 1,000 here and 312, which is extremely high. I explain why, and for battery, it's also quite high. You see, this is very high because the social cost of carbon here, this is a curve for France, but it's more or less the same for different places in Europe, is at 54. And in 2030, we expect it to be at 250, right? So see, that's much lower than these numbers here. So it means it's completely irrational from an economic point of view to make this transition at this level. It is a little bit better if we take into account the air pollution. The air pollution translates into a higher, you can introduce that as a higher fuel cost, in here for diesel. But still it's pretty high. So this means that, if you want to make an economic good decision, you have to reduce the purchase price considerably, and possibly also reduce the cost of energy here. To achieve that, the idea is that you could build on the experience curve, which we've seen for example, in PV, and that will depend on the rate of diffusion of fuel cell. Now, fuel cell are distributed here among the different cities in Europe. You see, and you see that the number is almost. Here it's 50, which is already some hope, but very well, it's low in terms. So any one of this city here has absolutely no level, no level for triggering high volume and decrease in cost. It is only if we aggregate all this demand and we coordinate this demand that we have some expectation of reducing the price of fuel cell bus. This is the role of the project. The European project are subsidizing cities for engaging into fuel cell bus through a pluriannual plan. They provide subsidy, they provide assistance, they help the cities to design a business plan to secure subsidies at the regional, national level, at the European level as well. And I think this is extremely important to achieve, the volume required for declining the price. So, putting everything together, what policies should be adopted to encourage deployment of hydrogen vehicles in Europe? We have to combine local and global coordination, solve the chicken and egg through regional cluster, in which we have institutionalized arrangement between the involved parties, and we have to increase the learning rate through accelerated effort and accumulation of progression globally. This suggests that this deployment will take 3 stages. First, a takeoff stage in which the emphasis will be on R&D, cluster, niche market, captive fleet. Then we'll have a powering up phase in which the demand will be increased through connecting the cluster, encouraging competition in OEM and energy provider, and eventually cruising. This, in my opinion, the deployment of hydrogen is in between these 2 stages, right? Whereas the deployment of battery electric vehicle is more between these 2. So this means that the issues and the policy to encourage these 2 technologies are quite different, and we should not try to jump too much. For example, the German H2 mobility plan, I think, jumped too quickly to a powering up phase, and that explained the difficulties. Takeoff you have to be extremely careful and build on captive fleet, which was not the case in the Easy Mob in Normandy. Well, that's the idea. Essentially, I wanted to submit for discussion. There are some reference here, which for those that are interested will be available on the slide. Now, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you ever so much, Jean-Pierre, for this very rich overview of many projects related to hydrogen mobility. That was very nice. Maybe I can start with a reaction and comments, because if I understood well, the hydrogen could be quite adequate for buses or trucks, more than for private vehicles. But I wonder, really, from the environmental point of view, taking a life cycle perspective, what is the environmental assessment like in a comparative way, and especially also about the end of life of such vehicles, because we saw some figures regarding the costs, but in fact, in terms of impacts, I was wondering, can you say some words on that? Where do we gain and where do we lose? Because I guess we do somewhere.
At the chair, we have a student that is starting a PhD on in-depth comparison of battery and fuel cell, and I hope we'll provide interesting answers. But at this point, I cannot tell what this will be. Still, for example, you see, in terms of CO2 emission, if you take a life cycle position, for battery, it depends where do you get your electricity from. If you get it from the average grid in Europe, it is still quite carbonized. If you are in Poland, or if you are, say, in the United States or in China, it's even more. Now you'll say, well, you also need electricity for hydrogen. Well, but that's not completely the end of the story, because hydrogen can be you can stock. Comment say stock? You can put
store?
It on. Store it, sorry, thank you. You can store it, right? So it means you can produce hydrogen from electricity coming from renewable, because when renewable deliver almost free electricity because there's too much wind, too much sun, etc., then you produce your hydrogen. This hydrogen is then, you produce hydrogen through electrolysis, and it is green. So I think it is easier to get decarbonized electricity through hydrogen rather than from battery, right? Okay, so the other thing is that there is quite many discussion in terms of components. Fuel cell use platinum, and the idea is how you could get rid of platinum, right? It's expensive. But the battery are using lithium, right? And I think in the two technology there are issues for end of life, as you mentioned, and that's true. One advantage of the two technology, which I think is important, is that they use they have a braking system, which limits strongly the emissions of fine particles. Yeah? But this is for the two technology. I'm mentioning that because in Paris. We know that a lot of fine particles are coming from the metro, huh? and so we should think of if we have air pollution in mind, public transport, such as underground, should be a top priority as well. Yeah. Changing that. Okay.
Oh, thank you very much for this comment. So in the chat, we've got a comment and question from Milena. Great analysis that confirms the need to collaborate to make mobility more sustainable. They illustrate the way policies can influence mobility sustainability. One question, what about hydrogen trains?
Yeah, trains is one segment in which hydrogen has some advantage. And the reason may not be so apparent it is because 50% of the grid for trains is not electrified.
Even more.
Even more.
Yeah.
It depends. I think that's figures in France. I think maybe for Germany it's higher. It depends on country, right? Yeah. Now it is extremely costly to electrify. So the trend is to have a hybrid trains, a train that would operate on hydrogen, and then when it gets to the electrified part of the grid, it would shift to electricity. Now, you see, train is one area which is changing. I think is changing very fast. Like let's see. 6 months ago, I was discussing with Alstom, which is one of the constructor of the hydrogen train and things like that. And they said, well, we hope to have some manifestation of interest, as they say, for hydrogen trains. But it is complicated in particular because in France, for example, the national operator is SNCF, but this is not our interlocutor. This is now the regions. The regions are the one that will decide, in particular because you see SNCF is the high-speed train, whereas the hydrogen is a more shorter section, so it will be operated by regional operators. And then if you look in the press in the last months or so, you could see many, let's say 3 or 4 regions in France that decided that they will demonstrate take a demonstration in trains. Now, so it is hydrogen is moving in train. Now, a question is, does that will help to solve the chicken and egg for hydrogen refilling station? A train is heavy, a high demand for hydrogen, but on the other hand, you cannot put the refilling station away from the grid. Huh? It has to be close to, so it has to be located at some precise area. So there is an interaction, but it certainly would. I'm sure that people working on the economics of hydrogen refilling station are trying to find synergies between these different usage. If I contrast that with the example I talked about EasyMob in Normandy, you know, in my mind, the disaster, you know, is that they were building on demand from the Kangoo hybrid. The Kangoo hybrid is a battery electric Kangoo with a fuel cell extension. That the autonomy goes from 150 to 300 kilometers, but they do not consume a lot of hydrogen, you see, because it's an extra.
Hybrid, yeah.
So low demand, poor economy of the refilling station. They were hoping to have you know, Mirai, Nexos, all this, all that, but they of course didn't. Nobody is going to buy a Mirai in Normandy, and so they were also hoping to have, you know, the master hydrogen from Renault. But you know, our car operators, you know, you probably follow that also in Europe. You know, they have been making strong move toward battery electric vehicle. They said they do something in hydrogen, but to encourage these car operators to go to engage into hydrogen it is certainly an important challenge. At this point, they fight to survive, for one thing, and they are making you know, they are putting a lot of their energy on battery and not it's not the case for trucks and buses. They are operators in truck and buses and trains as well that are moving towards hydrogen technology, and I think that's that also means, you know, that we have to think in terms of segments.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? I'm checking. Yeah, right. So another question. There are several lenders in Germany which are having projects. Oops, I can't read it now. It's disappeared. Where is it?
I can read it.
Yeah, right. Go. It escaped me.
Or Jean-Pierre, if you see it yourself, then you can just.
Yes, I think Germany was the first country in Europe where hydrogen train took place, right? And as Milena said, you know, I think the fraction of the grid in Germany which is not electrified is larger than the one in France, and so there is a potential for hydrogen train in Germany. I think there's also one project in Italy and also in North America. I have no idea if there are if there are plans for hydrogen trains in Asia. Asia is very strong in trucks and buses, and they recognize, I think, earlier than Europe or North America, that the future of hydrogen is on heavy mobility rather than vehicles. You see, when you talk, I say that you know, not publicly, and you don't quote me on that, but when you talk with Toyota and say, you know, why did you put so much money and interest in hype in Paris to sell your Mirai? Well, they say, well, you know, Paris, you know, there is the Olympics in 2024, and this will be very important. Indeed, you know, the hype project originated precisely at the time COP21 took place, and the first hydrogen refilling station was put on the Pont de l'Alma, which is a very easily recognized place in Paris. And it was supposed to be just temporary, it was just there, like the Eiffel Tower was temporary, when it was constructed for the Exposition 1900. And here they had the hydrogen refilling station on the Pont de l'Alma, just for COP21. And it was safe enough, and there were enough operations, so they kept it. I think for Air Liquide and Toyota at the beginning, this idea of promoting hydrogen cabs was partly a commercial, I mean, not a commercial, but partly well, I don't go as far as saying greenwashing, maybe that's too much, but it was really a publicity. Huh? Toyota is also taking a very strong position in Japan it was supposed to take a very strong position in 2020 Olympics, which didn't take place. And Japan is a country where hydrogen technology is probably the most advanced. I mean, the most supported by government. So this is I think it's a very, very fabulous time to work on, because there are many opportunities and many interesting studies to make, but it's difficult to see what is actually driving the development. What are the underlying forces that companies have for promoting this new technology? They are probably making bets at 10, 20 years ahead. Maybe Milena has some ideas on that. Maybe the companies that are the most eager to engage into this new technology. Do you have an interpretation of the rationale for this engagement?
Actually, the engagement rationale depends a lot on the country, on the company, sorry. Because there are companies who are engaging just to make sure that they're engaged, so that they do not get the surprise at some point that, well, it's working and we're not into it. And then there are other companies who actually believe that's one alternative they have to work on and are engaging because of that. But it's really, I can say that I have seen one singular way of engaging that interests them most.
Okay, thanks. Maybe before the break, there's a last question by Cyril François. Asking, is the mobility the best sector to use hydrogen due to low energy density and low energy conversion factor? What do you think? Or maybe
the French hydrogen plan, the priority is for development of hydrogen in industry, which is, for example, in steel, aluminium, glass, all these industry which are actually very heavily carbonized emissions. But there, the challenge is to produce green hydrogen at a low cost, because otherwise they would not make the substitution. And the current level of the carbon price on the EU ETS is too low. Is too low to trigger such a say strong transformation of this industry. In mobility, I think that there are a number of niches, as I mentioned. There are a number of small segments on which they can be used. There may be more than you can think. Huh? I can mention two. In mountain camp, refuge, they have to have electricity. A number of them have electricity with diesel, which is the diesel is coming from helicopter, and then they have a Groupe électrogène, so that to produce electricity. There are a number of places where they have, and PV is not that good because you have to store, and hydrogen is actually being deployed for that. Also, there's another area in which there may be some opportunity. If you are in a city like Marseille, you have these cruiser boats, large boats, that they are emitting extremely polluted because they are very polluting because of the fuel, heavy fuel they use. Now, to allocate to use a fuel cell to generate electricity when they stay on board, may be much easier than to have electric cables going all through, from one area to another. So that's the idea is that hydrogen can actually be used, but not in general. It has to be very much analyzed.
Well, thank you very much again, Jean-Pierre, for this very nice opening ideas around the hydrogen usages. I think we're going to take a short break and be back at 15:45 for the roundtable. So thank you so much, Milena and Jean-Pierre, for these two keynote speeches, and thank you everybody for attending, and please join us again at 15:45. Thank you.